our products that work as single products and as one ecosystem together. Our flagship product is AI Search, for which we partnered up and launched a joint venture with the Cambridge University AI spin-off company Apta AI. We're going to have the AI engineers from Apta AI talking in just a moment. But I just want to quickly say a few words about the other products in our ecosystem. Hero is also a private browser with a wallet. You can have AI search within our browser, or it can work as a standalone product. And we also have Hero Pay. It's a way for businesses to accept crypto payments and merchants account. And I just want to, because we're going to have a number of talks and networking opportunities afterwards, I just want to quickly introduce the team members of both Hero and Apta that we have today. So we have Brandon, our head of data engineering at Hero. If you're interested what data our AI models are trained with, how our data infrastructure works, you please come and talk to Brandon. We have Tadas here, the project lead for Hero.io. He knows a lot about the whole ecosystem that we have here. So besides the people who are on the stage, we have Vias. Word up. Vias is here, and this is not Vias, this is Vatal. We have AI twins here. And we have Pete from Apta AI as well, AI engineer from the University of Cambridge. So if you want to talk about anything AI, talk to these guys, or we have Vatal and Sharam on the stage. And one last final thing, we have brought so much beautiful merch here. And we find Hero a really cool name, because like everyone needs a hero and everyone wants to be a hero in your dreams. So please come by that table. We have backpacks, we have t-shirts, and don't be shy. Scan the QR code that's on our flyers or on our scans and leave your email address. You will receive 1 month free premium membership of Hero AI Search as soon as our product is going to be live. So you will get that crypto alpha before your friends. What can be better than that? And thank you now for listening to the intro, and I will give the floor to our speakers who are going to talk about investing in AI.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for a full day of events here about AI. So I think it's pretty obvious. Everyone's super excited by AI. And the main driving force behind this has been the development of conversational AI models. These are what we call large language models like ChatGPT, Mistral, Claude, Gemini. And a lot of us now are using them every single day. And that's what today's talk is really going to be focused on, conversational AI. Because in our opinion, conversation is the best way to interact with technology, and that's why these tools have been adopted so much. So there's a few things we want to cover in today's talk. We're thinking more from an investment angle. We're going to talk about our experiences working in enterprise AI, but also in collaboration with some of the biggest venture capital firms in AI, and share with you where we feel opportunities lie for new companies to emerge and for investors to invest. So to start off with, we want to give you a quick background, a very quick background to what large language models are capable of and how they've evolved. That will provide us the perfect landscape to understand where gaps lie in the commoditization of conversational AI. So these are areas where, like I said, new companies should be looking to develop, or investors should be looking to place their money. In the third section, we want to share with you a quick due diligence checklist. This is something we developed in collaboration with Dawn Capital, one of the premier VCs in Europe. And the idea is these should be some of the signals that you should be look out for when an AI company comes through your door, with regards to whether you should continue the conversation or perhaps just leave it there. And finally, we want to quickly explain to you how conversational AI is progressing and how Apta is developing that and integrating that into the crypto landscape in collaboration with Hero. So just a quick background to the team, because you're probably wondering, what do we know about LLMs? What do we know about AI? So at the core, Apta is academic first. We're a spin out from the University of Cambridge. All of our co-founders have PhDs from the university. Vatsal, Vyas, and Aiden, they lead the AI engineering at the company. The three of them all did their PhDs in the Machine Intelligence Lab at the University of Cambridge, one of the most famous institutions globally for cutting-edge AI research. They started with actually an engineering degree at Cambridge, and for many, just getting into Cambridge is a huge achievement. But as you can see, the three of them all ranked in the top 10 of the university, so a massive achievement. Getting in wasn't enough for them. They've also built AI at some of the biggest companies in the world. Vatsal was at Meta, where he worked with members of the team that developed the Llama model and also RAG. And his twin brother there, Vyas, was at AWS. They've published over 30 papers in top-tier conferences with over 1,000 citations. So they're really at the cutting edge of conversational AI research. In terms of my background, after an initial foray into medical sciences and medicine, I did my PhD in computational biology. That was lying at the intersection of biotech and deep learning and machine learning. I then founded my first startup in the AI space within the healthcare domain before going to McKinsey for a year, where I worked on generative AI consultancy in the early days before starting my own consultancy. And I want to quickly touch upon what we did in the consultancy there, because a lot of those insights are forming today's discussion. So at the consultancy, we worked with many players in the AI space, including large AI native companies. These are companies that are really pushing forward the translation of AI research into the real domain. The biggest client we had was Samba Nova Systems. They're effectively building a mixture of expert model. So models that combine lots of different LLMs together. So when you ask a question about finance, the finance LLM is triggered. Or when you ask a question about the legal sector, no LLM is triggered. And they're a really large company doing really well, which is great to see. They're now valued at over 7 billion, with a lot of clients across the world. We also work with some of the biggest AI adopters in the world. So the National Healthcare System in the UK, they're looking to integrate AI, as well as the Saudi Arabia Council of Health Insurance. And then finally, what a lot of today's talk is going to be guided by is the work we did from the other side of the table, working with Dawn Capital, who have a $700 million generative AI fund, and we did the technical due diligence for a lot of their companies. So that's a quick introduction to who we are, what we're going to do. I'm going to pass over to Vatsal, who's going to give us an introduction to the technology.
Thanks, Sharon. So I just want to give a brief introduction of how LLMs are trained. I'm sure many of you are familiar, so I won't take up too much time on that. So in the first stage of training any LLM is what we call is the pre-training stage. During pre-training, an LLM is trained to predict the next word in a sentence. And when extended to train on textual data across the internet, the LLM gains a strong grasp of the language. But standalone, the LLM is not very useful, because all it can really do is complete sentences. So this is where the second stage steps in. And this stage is what we call instruction following. In the instruction following stage, an LLM is further trained using instruction tuning. So we take a pre-trained LLM and train it on a range of supervised tasks. For example, translation, summarization, or even question answering. And with these steps of training on these supervised tasks, the fine-tuned LLM is capable of flexibly following a general range of instructions through just a simple prompt. So I've summarized to you how these common-day instruction-tuned LLMs are trained. And if we were to use these at this point, this is what we call zero-shot usage of these generalist instruction-tuned LLMs. Now, often, there is a third stage which is possible for many companies, because they might have niche data for a specific purpose. And what happens is these instruction-tuned LLMs can be further trained bespokely on these tasks to be able to perform the task of interest for a specific enterprise. I won't go into too much detail about this third stage right now, but Sharon will describe later in the presentation more details.
Perfect. Thank you, Vatsal. So let's use that quick introduction to kind of see where we think the gaps lie in the commoditization of LLMs. So Vatsal just talked about these models in the top left. These are our pre-trained models. They have a fantastic grasp of English language. On the top right, stage 2, we have instruction tuning. So now these models with great language abilities can start doing useful tasks. And what we call this kind of industries, we call that model as a service. These are providers who are developing these foundational models that can go on and be used for these instruction tasks. Now, personally, we feel that this is not necessarily the best place to be looking to build in or invest in. And this is for 3 reasons. Firstly, there's not really any defensibility in the sector. Everyone is using the same transformer architecture to power their models, They're also training it on freely available content that's available on the internet. Every company in the world has the same access to the same data, and therefore it's not necessarily the most defensible solution to go into. The second big problem with this is we've kind of reached this point right now where models' performance increases aren't really tangible to the end user. So yes, there's a lot of work going on to improve models, but the end user can't really feel them. And when you combine that with actually how capital intensive it is to develop these models, it really has a very low ROI. And often this industry, model as a service, is reserved for the biggest tech players who have lots of R&D budget to throw into this and have kind of separate revenue streams to build this out. So model as a service perhaps isn't the most exciting place to build in or invest in right now. But a second layer has emerged, and that's what we call infrastructure as a service. So infrastructure as a service are the providers who provide the compute to store and deploy AI models. And again, this is a fairly difficult space to get into. Again, to have these resources, it's very capital intensive. And also, the market is currently dominated by three main players, American players, AWS, Azure, and CoreWeave, who kind of have a large share of GPU resource. Now, there are some potential facets that can come in here where companies can emerge, and we think that comes into two main angles. So one, companies that are approaching this from an ethical standpoint. Right now, running these models is not very environmentally friendly, and companies that are looking to power data centers with green energy have a lot of potential here. But also, kind of the second play here is kind of democratizing the availability of these compute resources. So these are decentralized companies that are now taking away the power of GPU resource from just a small number of American players to opening this up to the wider industry. So that's infrastructure as a service. So just to summarize, models as a service perhaps not the best place. Infrastructure as a service, potential angles to play here at. Now, where we feel the biggest value lies is in building what we call business-specific large language models. There is no point of being the jack of all trades. Models that can do everything simply aren't going to win against these foundational models that we've shown earlier. Now, what we think will really add value here is companies that build domain-focused, specialized conversational AI systems that leverage what we call proprietary data. Now, in AI, data is your cash cow. Data is your defensibility. So companies that have unique data from the outset or have a pipeline to gather unique data from their users have an edge over everyone else because they can train their models, like Cecil mentioned, and fine-tune these foundational models to build these business-specific LLMs that no one else can have because they don't have the access to the same data. So that's just one touch into where we feel some value lies. And I'm going to pass back to Cecil, who's going to talk more about the deployment side of things.
Thanks, Sharon. So on the deployment side, we also identify further opportunities in the LLM landscape where we feel that perhaps earlier stage companies can compete against these big tech. So the first example is what we call ensembling. So ensembling is that we can supercharge the performance of a model if we combine a lot of other smaller models, because each model will learn different aspects of the data. Another opportunity is in uncertainty estimation. In the near future, it's unlikely that people will trust to use AI models completely in isolation. It's more likely they will be used in a hybrid manner where an AI system works in collaboration with an AI system. Now, uncertainty estimation enables that because it allows each model's output to be scored with an uncertainty metric, telling you how much you should trust the AI model. And this will enable the human and the AI system to work in tangent with each other to be able to perform a certain task. Now, another opportunity is continual learning. In the current LLM landscape, each LLM model is trained on what we call like a static set of data and has to kind of be retrained every few months to update it with the latest information on the web. For example, who is the president of the United States? If people are able to crack into the continual learning market space, this will enable continual update of information in what we call the parametric memory of an LLM and help it to keep up to date. Another example is adversarial robustness. As we move out of academic arenas into the actual deployment of these LLM models, they will be exposed to all kinds of adversaries, people who have bad intentions when they use a certain model. A typical example is like if you have a driverless car, you don't want it to misinterpret like a stop sign to be a 50 km/h sign. because that can have negative consequences downstream. So people who are working on adversarial robustness, trying to patch up these mathematical vulnerabilities of these LLMs, will enable faster and safer deployment of these LLMs to the market. And finally, another example where we feel on the deployment side that you should explore is on the personalization. Most generalist LLM systems cater to all audiences in the same way. If you're able to personalize to your user base in a specific way, or even to the individual user, it will enable a far more immersive experience for the user base. So that's on the deployment side. What about on the training side? So one aspect on the training side is efficient training. As Sharon mentioned, there's a huge overhead cost associated with training these LLMs, especially if they have to be trained on a regular basis. So people who are looking at methods to try and train these models efficiently will have potential opportunity to outcompete their competition. Another aspect is trustworthy LLMs. As everyone knows, LLMs at the end of the day are language models. They hallucinate because they're probabilistically just generating one token or word conditional on the context. So hallucination detection methods incorporated into the training strategy will help improve the accuracy of these LLMs for language-based tasks and even beyond. And one other third example is federated learning, which specifically applies in this blockchain community. Often we want to keep data distinct from each other and still be able to use that to train a model. So how can we use a model to train on different data sources which are not all in a centralized location? So this is what federated learning will enable. And companies pursuing this direction also have an opportunity in the LLM landscape. So here I've kind of summarized to you some of the possible opportunities in the LLM landscape. Now what I want to do is take you through two case studies. These two case studies describe two different companies that you might be worth considering investing into. And as I take you through these case studies, I want you to consider what points for each case study are black swans, i.e. positives, what would be a good point to invest in the company, or red flags, something which looks like a negative about the company. So let's take a look at the first case study. This is a company called Chat AI. It basically builds persona-based chatbot technology. The team itself is based on researchers from University of Cambridge. Now they are in California based. And the way they train the models is on data they collect from the system itself by interacting with the users. The evaluation methodology for this system is based on real-world metrics, based on, for example, user retention and the feedback of the users itself. Alternatively, we have a company called ChatGPT. It's a medtech-based startup, which all it does is effectively summarize medical notes to be able to be digestible for downstream tasks. The team is based on economics and chemistry graduates, and really the technology that they're using is simple API access to off-the-shelf solutions. In the way they evaluate the quality of the summary, they use typical summarization metrics that's used in academia, for example, Rouge. So I've taken you through two case studies here, very briefly. And I just want to get a feel of which company people feel like they would want to invest into. So maybe just very briefly, if I have a show of hands, who would rather invest into case study A? Some people there. And who would rather invest into this one, case study B? Okay, so equally agnostic, I'd say. So let's actually see what Sharon has to say about what might be a more sensible investment, and more importantly, why.
Sure. So we tried to pick two examples that would be a little bit more clear-cut than that simple balance there. But let me talk you through this due diligence checklist that we created with Dawn Capital. By no means is this the gold standard due diligence checklist. It's just an indicator for what you might find useful the next time a company walks through your door or you're trying to build in this space. So one of the first things that we look for is a team. The team is one of the most important things, especially in this new wave of AI. Now, the first company we saw had NLP engineers in their founding team, natural language processing, a very important skill set to have when building conversational AI technologies. That's something that we think is very important, and I'll come on to why. The second thing is, what is the core large language model that they're using? If the majority of the product is LLM-based, simply using off-the-shelf APIs gives you no defensibility. Any other company in the world can use the same thing. So what we like to look for are companies that are fine-tuning models to make them distinct and defensible. The third thing we look for is the opportunity to innovate. And this comes hand in hand with the founding team's technical skills. Teams which have strong academic or NLP expertise are able to implement cutting-edge research techniques to help them stand out from the rest. The fourth then is defensibility. We look for examples already in companies that already exist to see if there's any novel ways that they're applying LLM technology, either in the back end or in the way that they ensemble or pipeline LLMs together. The fifth is the point I mentioned right at the start. We don't think that there's any defensibility in trying to be the jack of all trades. There's simply enough companies in this space already. So where we think real value lies are the companies that are focusing on very domain-specific applications, which is powered by proprietary data. And that's the next point, data. So either the company should have a proprietary data set from the outset, or they should be storing proprietary data from their users from the outside as well. If a company has either of those things, we feel more reassured because they understand the value of proprietary data. The second to last is evaluation metrics. So we gave two examples there. The first company cares about real-world business metrics. There is no point trying to optimize your models, your conversational systems on academic metrics, because we've seen that they don't align with true business use case and business value. So companies that are optimizing from the outset for actual engagement metrics are much more likely to succeed. And we've seen already in the short time that large language models have been out there, even the big companies have shifted towards human evaluation benchmarks over these academic benchmarks. And finally, it's always important to think about a company's outset and view on terms of ethics and safety going forward. The first company perhaps didn't really care about where their technology was used. In fact, this is based on a real client out there that we work with, and a lot of their technology is now being used for problems they weren't initially trying to solve, and perhaps unethical situations, whereas other companies are trying to solve more important problems. So I think that's a quick roundup of due diligence. Maybe you can add some of these to your list the next time you see a company walk through your door. And now I just want to quickly touch upon how LLMs are probably not enough in conversational AI. There's actually another step beyond this. So large language models, as amazing and as intelligent as they might seem, they are held back for two reasons. The first is they're not very good at handling lots of different data types beyond unstructured text. And that's problematic when you want to start automating more complex workflows that rely on different data types in any use case. But the second big problem that we touched upon this morning as well is that LLMs inherently aren't designed to reason. They just predict the next word, basically. And that's not really the best way of doing things, especially when you want robustness and accuracy from these conversational systems. So just to give you an example, this is how an LLM works. You ask a question, it will predict the next word. And the field realizes this is a big limitation because it's not grounded in any truth or any specific reasoning. So the next paradigm is what we call agentic flow. And I'm going to quickly run through this because we touched on this morning. But essentially, in agentic flow, we only use the LLM to understand the question. The actual cognitive heavy lifting is done by agentic functions that can reason and can deal with diverse data types beyond text. And then we pass the answer back to the LLM to produce this conversational output. So essentially, the LLM becomes the ears and the mouth of the system, but the brain is now a suite of agents. And we've actually applied this framework in partnership with Hero to develop an AI co-pilot to provide information access and analytics to everyone through conversation. And I want to talk you through just some of the features that we have, just to give you an idea of what this technology is capable of. So if we talk through the various agents we have, one of them that we can see with the red tick is the live market expert. This basically enables you to ask very complex queries about live market data. So you might have a particular thesis and you want to find tokens that meet that, or you might want to be up to date with all the market information. You can now trigger all of that through conversation, through very simple language, which isn't really achievable elsewhere in the space. But that's just kind of touching the surface of what we're capable of. Another thing that we're capable of is an influencer validator. So this is basically a model. We understand that in the crypto space, a lot of investors buy because an influencer tells them to do so. Now, what the influencer validator does is we process thousands and thousands of videos from the top influencers in the space, primarily from YouTube right now. And we track the performance of KOLs based on their calls. So you can find out exactly what the track record of an influencer is, but also perhaps a bit more granularity. How long does a token go up for after an influencer mentions it before it crashes? So you can make more advised decisions in that regards. We also have a range of other experts. For example, imagine that you've sent a transaction on the blockchain. You want to just find out where that is. Right now, navigating blockchain explorers is incredibly difficult. But now, through our technology, you can do that through chat. And we'll have a range of other systems that we're happy to demonstrate to you at the end. So please come and find some of our team, and we'll be happy to give you a demo of the system. And yeah, this is just a video which we can show you all individually, just to show what the system is capable of right now. So here, a trader likes to buy gaming coins. They like to buy gaming coins near their all-time low of a particular size. And they've added a range of filters here. So they want to be between 2 and 100 million. They have to have the all-time low in the last 2 months, and they haven't increased more than 20% since. And we can see right now the LLM is understanding the intent, and it's passing this on to our market expert, the live market expert I mentioned first. And it's quickly outputting all those tokens within a few seconds that meet your criteria, rapidly improving and increasing the speed of this workflow, saving you a lot of time. And now we can provide a bit more alpha. So now the user is asking, give me some technical analysis about a particular token that was mentioned. And the system is now performing a range of quant indicators on this particular token and making it interpretable. We're not just giving you the signal, we're telling you what the signal means, all through natural language. And we have complete multimodal output as well, so you can fully interact with the signals that are being produced. So yeah, that's a quick whistle-stop tour of what we're doing. I hope today you've got a better understanding of kind of what's out there in terms of the broader conversational AI landscape, and also kind of exciting opportunities to invest in and to build in, as well as where we think conversational AI is going next with agentic flow. So yeah, feel free to find us afterwards. Thank you so much for listening. And on the top right, we have a QR code for you to scan if you're interested to get access to Hero and find out some more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to have the next speaker right away, Elias. Please come on the stage. Chief Science Officer at AI, who is also killing it and working on producing the best possible AI tool, everyone's helper, everyone's hero, as in Web3 and crypto. So Elias is going to talk about his background working in a similar field when it comes to investing in stocks, and what we can learn from that experience and how that is, how we're applying that for Hero.io. So thank you. It's going to be an exciting talk.
Yeah, sorry, just bear with me a few seconds, guys.
Yeah, so while we're connecting, I know Jerome already mentioned, but leave your email address and we're going to get you the early access to Hero.io search engine where you can ask any questions about crypto. Yeah, the presentation connected. Thanks.
Amazing. Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the last talk. I am... Oh, bear with me. We're running on low battery. Do we have a charger by any chance? Should we use this for charging? Then I can use this HDMI. Sure. Does that work? Does it charge it? All right, thank you for the tech support, guys. Okay, yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed the last talk. I'm V.S. Rayner. As Ada introduced me, I'm the Chief Science Officer here at Apta. And today, I'm going to be talking to you about alpha, and alpha in the space of natural language. So we, as humans, we like to invest. We invest in assets. It could be cryptocurrencies. It could be futures. It could be normal stocks. But to make our investment decisions, we often go by what our friends say. We go by what we read in social media. We read the news. And we say, you know what? My gut says, let's go buy this. And this is good. We often make good decisions. We often make bad decisions. But the whole aim of NLP is to try and automate this and scale this so we can look at all the different natural language sources and come up with a more principled approach to identify the signals. And these signals are what we call alpha. So before I begin, I just want to give a very, very brief background to myself and why I'm giving this talk. And if I can make this clicker work, is there a button I should press? I'm just going to do this. Should I just press this? Oop. I'm just going to do this instead. Bear with me, guys. Maybe I just scroll. Do you know what's going on? Does this work? It's PDF maybe. Maybe. Sorry, guys. I'm going to skip this. Maybe just scroll instead. I think it's fine, usually. Let's go with it this way. I'm just going to scroll with it. I'm sure everyone can survive. Okay, so very, very brief background to myself to make up for the time. I did my undergrad and PhD at the University of Cambridge in the Machine Intelligence Lab. I was working on the adversarial robustness of large language models. And then I also did this research at Amazon, where I was doing the same work, looking to publish papers and work with their large language models into how we can make them robust when we deploy them. So this gave me an insight into LLMs and how they work. And I went on to apply this in the finance domain whilst working at a hedge fund based in New York for about a year and a half. And the aim here is what I said at the beginning. Can we have an automatic strategy to extract alpha from natural language sources? So to discuss this, I want to begin with just giving a very, very short overview of what we mean by NLP, natural language processing, in the most general sense. LLMs have been well described by my colleagues earlier, but here what we have is an overall framework. NLP, at the end of the day, takes any natural language input and performs a function. It maps an input to an output as per a desired task. So an example you can see here is the NLP model has been trained to perform sentiment classification. So the input is, I went to a park where it was nice and sunny today. And as humans, we think this is positive, and the model correctly does sentiment classification as positive. But sentiment classification is not the only task. You can have any natural language processing task of interest. And this is where LLMs become extremely powerful. This is a general NLP model, but LLMs are a superset of this. What they do is perform this task in a much more flexible manner. So by going through a stage called instruction tuning, these LLMs are trained to perform a range of tasks, which is controlled through a prompt. And what this prompt then allows is the flexible administration of the task. So in the example of sentiment classification, we can have an LLM, such as ChatGPT, do the exact same task, but instead we pass it as a prompt. So you can see the prompt here is, what is the sentiment towards the sun in the sentence given? And great, we can perform the same task. And maybe one point to emphasize here is now our output is not a binary label of positive or negative, but now we also have an explanation, which is only really possible because LLMs have a generative output. So this frames the technology we have available at hand, and we want to apply this to try and extract alpha. So what is the general framework here? So as humans, we see unstructured text sources, we see the news, we see social media. And what we do is identify the assets being referred to in this. And once we've identified the assets, we try and identify whether the news or the social media we've read is giving a positive or a negative signal, and that informs our investment decision. And this is the same framework that we want to automate, but also scale to every different natural language source we can think of. But what's more important than automating this in the space of finance is having an explanation behind the strategies we have. We don't want a strategy which just works well in the past. We want to align it with our human intuition. Because once we align with human intuition, we know that it's robust to changes in the future. So what do I mean by explanation? So what I mean by human intuition here is we want some kind of explainability behind the task. So if you can see the title, explainability. So in one use case, we have a strategy which is deployed. It goes and tells us to buy Apple, which is great. It could work very well. But this is not enough. The better strategy is the one shown below. Here, we have it giving the signal, go buy Apple, but also explaining why we should go and buy that stock. Because if you have the explanation, and you're given that explanation, as a human, you trust the decision being made. And that's what I mean by a robust decision. So now, okay, we have the framework. We know what we want to automate. How do we actually go and extract the alpha? I've come up with 3 popular use cases which hedge funds employ, and some not so popular use cases to extract alpha, but perhaps very powerful. So the simplest is a sentiment signal. I think everyone knows that sentiment drives a lot of behavior in investment. And so in the space of assets, you may look at CEO call transcripts. You may look at social media posts, the 2 main sources which carry the most sentiment. You go and apply your NLP technology. In this case, it doesn't even have to be an LLM. It could be the very first framework we had, which goes and identifies the sentiment in the input text. And once you've identified the sentiment associated with a particular asset, it could be the polarity, you can use this to decide whether it's a buy or sell. But what's interesting here is you don't need to only extract the polarity of the sentiment. You can perhaps find signals if you extract different forms of sentiment. So a few are listed here. There's emotional, there's uncertainty-based, and there is temporal. All these things can influence one's strategy. But again, going back to the very important point of having explainable approach, I want to discuss how can we make this approach robust? How can we trust the decision made through our sentiment analysis? And this is where we come into the explainability of sentiment. So we have in this pipeline the source of documents about asset X. We've used some clever NLP technology to only filter out those documents. How do we extract the reasons behind the sentiment given? Well, imagine for each sentiment decision, we also extract the reason using an LLM. We have a vast number of reasons. What we can do with these reasons is something called NLP topic modeling. So what you see on the right is clusters of different reasons. So each point represents a reason. And if we do some kind of clever clustering approach, it's an unsupervised approach, we could find maybe the nexus of each cluster, which explains the main reason behind the decision. So for example, here you could say the company is hiring aggressively. All that collection is referring to those kinds of reasons, which would inform our investment decision. So again, we now have a robust strategy that tells us what to do, but also why to do it. And that was Alpha 1. And that's probably the most common form of natural language extraction done by companies, hedge funds, even individual traders today. But Alpha 2 becomes a bit smarter. It says, well, it's not only the sentiment we care about. There are also many salient events which cause big jump changes or step changes in price movements of assets. So these typical sources which indicate these kind of movements will be given in financial reports, news articles, there's broker research reports from third-party providers, and most importantly, company filings. All of these give a wealth of information about potential significant changes in the behavior of different projects or different companies. So kind of salient events you could extract using an NLP model could include things like acquisitions, mergers. They could include product launches, lawsuits even. And all of these are very, very strong signals of how the price is going to move. And again, these are the type of signals we tend to extract as humans when we read the news. But with the NLP models, we can do this at scale. So Alpha 1, Alpha 2, I would say fairly simple. But my favorite is Alpha 3. I've seen it deployed very little in practice, but I generally believe this is probably the most powerful in the future. So what is Alpha 3? Alpha 3 is trying to look at the causal relationship between different assets. So now you're not only trying to identify the signal for a specific asset. You take all your natural language sources and you identify whether there is a causal relationship between any pair. So for example, in one report, you find that, in this example, that Colton Mining had a drop in its stock price. There may have been an accident at the mining site. You also notice in the same report, this led to a shortage in supply of iPhones. So you populate your causal graph, which we see on the left here, with two nodes. One is the Apple node for iPhones, and the other is the node associated with a mining company. And you say, mining influences Apple. Now, if you go through all your natural language sources, you can populate an extremely rich graph structure, which tells you all the relationships between all the assets in your natural language sources. And once you have a rich enough graph, and you get a new asset being mentioned in the media or in the news, without referring to the other assets, you can work out how the other assets would also move from a movement in one specific asset. And this, I think, is very powerful in the future, because now in your source, you can inform your investment decisions for many assets, and not just the one you selected at that point. So these are just three popular alpha signals, which I think are the most powerful and the most meaningful to apply. But I just want to frame this as an overall framework for what this means in actual deployment. So there's only 4 real steps. First, you come up with a strategy to identify potential signals. And that's for the alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3 strategies. Then you go and backtest the strategy on all historic data to see how well it did. If it did well, you go and then verify that it is actually explainable, because you only want to go ahead with a strategy in times that are extremely temporal, where it is robust. And it's robust if it's explainable. And once you're sure of this, you go and deploy your strategy and hope you make some money with automatic trading. So that's the conclusion. And this is kind of listing the same points I've gone through in the presentation, which you can read. But the point I want to emphasize is this is not restricted just to assets in the terms of stocks, but this is something we are also employing as data insights as part of APTA when serving Hero. We want to make the same deep insights, which are usually ring-fenced for experts or analysts in the area, but to the everyday user. And so I hope this talk was informative and useful to see how we can use NLP to automate trading using natural language sources. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. So we leave the questions for the sessions that you can have in person right after the event. And our next speaker is Pete. And he is going to talk about how watermarking LLMs opens a new way to monetize LLMs and to monetize the content online, which is something that some builders in Web3 and AI space could be interested, and that is rooted in Pete's research at the University of Cambridge. So I'm going to go to
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Peter. I would like to tell you about the ability of self-signing for, thank you. Which one is the next? It's this one, yeah. Ability of self-signing of LLM texts, and tell you that this is relevant for the autonomous and interactive AI systems as the Hero and Apta AI search is going to be. To give you some background of who I am, I have recently finished also Cambridge in undergraduate and master's in information sciences. My research has been in safe and ethical use of large language models. And after this, I was recently, a couple months ago, presenting my outcomes at the Computational Linguistics conference. So what is exactly my concern? Web3 focuses on the user-owned internet. There is already so many ways in verifying ownership of different digital content. So what about the LLM-generated texts? We should definitely extend this further. With the rise of artificial intelligence finance, as I said, we're going to be producing a lot of reports and outputs. We would like to be accountable for this and be able to prove that this is our work. In the current system, monetization focuses on at inference time, which means that developers build more powerful and bigger pre-trained or fine-tuned models that still kind of rely on hallucination and what they remembered from the training data. But there is lack of focus on the factuality and the value-added content of the actual outputs, as this is what's our focus. And we would like our systems to be robust against potential edits, against people copying our outputs, changing some parts, making misinformation or phishing attempts, attempting rug pulls, claiming to be Apta verified source, and as I said, trying to spread misinformation. In academia, the detection focuses on teachers trying to prevent students from abusing LLM. Many of you may be familiar with ignore all previous instructions, where lazily written LLM bots are spread all over the internet, and people are trying to expose them by ignoring all previous commands, overwriting it. This is something that can be stopped with proper watermarking approaches. In our specific case, our Apta AI can be very widespread. We can be available on the main website, the hero, the Apta one, available embedded in systems and plugins, but also produce reports in different social media outlets, in community chats, Telegram. We imagine that in the future, users may find reports that are very much like ours on some suspicious Telegram communities and be able to verify, copy the text directly and see, is this actually Apta source? Is it actually something that we provide? So, the scope for today, I would like to give you a high-level overview of how LLMs operate and why it makes it feasible for the self-signing to be embedded in the output natural text. Then highlight what's the current progress of the LLM watermarking approaches and kind of give you an idea of what's the future overlap between the LLM technology and methods with the blockchain and cryptography knowledge that can be brought together. So, step one. LLMs convert sequences of words and sentences into numbers. Every LLM has roughly 20 to 100, nowadays even more, tokens that they're specifically using as their vocabulary. These can be converted back and forth to the number representation and again to the text representation. Once we have these numbers, we feed them as an input for a lot of complex mathematical computations. In 2017, a group of Google researchers published a paper, Attention is All You Need, giving a general template how these mathematical operations should be carried out to give good understanding of models into natural language. So what we kind of highlighted in our previous talks, these models produce one token or one word at a time. So if we were to start with this tokenization makes sense too, it would continue with suggesting me. Maybe we feed it again into the system, it would suggest a comma, then suggest a but, and so on and so on and so on. In practice, it does even more than suggesting just the best token. In fact, if we look at the left side, it gives its confidence of the entire 20, 50, 100,000 tokens, how likely are they to continue the sentence? So if I were to start with this project is, maybe in a very simple approach, I would choose only the most suitable element and say that I would continue it with a remarkable. And this is exactly where watermarking comes in. So what we can imagine, we can set in place some specific rules to alter these probabilities, alter this distribution, and exclude some of the tokens, some of the probabilities, improve the likelihood of other ones appearing, and kind of see that this difference in the word choice. So in this case, because I removed entirely probability of remarkable, now the model chose insightful as the other suitable replacement. Many of you may be familiar with some overused words by ChatGPT, like meticulous or versatile. They're some kind of giveaways. This kind of change of words can be used exactly for this kind of detection. To put it in a specific example, let's say that we have a LLM that's using 30,000 tokens as its vocabulary, and then we prepare a specific function that based on a personal bot identity seed, as well as the hashed sequence history, we choose 3,000 of the tokens, 10% of the entire set, and we completely exclude it from generation. So at every step, at every token, we know a predetermined set of elements that cannot appear. If at any point we see that this rule is violated, we know that the signature is broken and this is not the text, for example, generated by Apta. This gives a very high confidence, growing exponentially in the signature, and because of its dependence of the personal seed as well as the previous history, it's dynamic. This is not a set 3,000 tokens that's repeated, excluded all the time. It keeps changing, and it's very difficult for potential attackers to figure out just from the outputs. To give it into a more concrete example, the text is not very important. The idea is that Apta produces an AI news report. We've compiled a bunch of news, written an autonomous report as to what's been happening. To this report, we can append at the end about 80 to 100 word conclusion. And in this conclusion, we can embed the entire signature. With just 130 tokens in such conclusion, we get a 99.99999% confidence that this is done by Apta. Choosing a single character in the original report would completely change the seed for the entire signature here, and would mean this same probability of appearing at least one of the banned words and completely breaking the signature. So although this approach is not entirely deterministic, it gives a really good confidence in the method. While this is quite powerful, there are some downsides to this approach. As I said, this is a simple way to kind of present the possibility. This is a generation verification symmetrical, which means that someone who can verify the system knows how to generate the exclusion rules and will also be able to generate outputs that would be Apta. In the future, we would imagine that it would be nice to decouple these two systems and have separately generation method and a decentralized verification method that anyone could kind of use. So researchers investigate a lot of more complex methods. So I showed just a 10% exclusion rule. In fact, people use adaptive restrictions, semantic similarity-based watermarking, in-text edits, and other non-causal approaches. Me personally, my research has been focused on laying the groundwork for the watermarking itself. I've been preparing for my research, I prepared a framework for people to evaluate the strength of their signatures and kind of the quality output of the related text. So this is just the first step of getting state-of-the-art approaches. I would like to highlight one more difference between the focus of academia and the focus of industry. Because mostly, academia is focused with LLM detection in general, where the watermark and the signature should be robust to many edits, and detection is fine to be coupled with generation. As I said, modern cryptographic methods can improve this and firstly, decouple the private generation from the public verification, as well as something that I've already kind of achieved in my example. It's possible to break with minimal edits because we want this, trustworthy, verifiable source. So to conclude, as I said, these are the first steps of LLM watermarking. They may be very necessary in the future of verifiable identity of bot assistants. People can have a proper decentralized chain, storing these identities online and storing the methods of verification. And it gives a lot of opportunities for researchers to join the LLM field with the modern cryptography methods to kind of combine and improve on, as I said, the easy rule that I kind of set up to have a more robust system in place. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's have some time to